Joining us is Dammegard and Cody Snodgres. Ole, of course, we have had on the show before. He is a giant in the truth community. And Cody, who spent 20 plus years as an independent contractor for black budget operations. He was approached to carry out the Oklahoma City bombing. Amazing. How are both you gentlemen going there today?
Doing good.
Yeah, everything's great. Thank you for having us.
It's good to hear. So please, Cody, elaborate on your background. I'm sure the viewers will be fascinated. You've got quite a story to share.
I can just hit the high points. I graduated with double degrees here in the U.S. in mathematics and physics. I was the CI came to recruit me way back in 1975. Later on, I went on to graduate school. I turned down recruitment with him at that time, and then went on to graduate school, worked on my Master of Science degree, got to fly the Space Shuttle simulator at NASA, worked at Chevron Geosciences in Houston, Texas, and then moved up to Amoco Amoco Production Company in Tulsa, Oklahoma, here in the U.S. And that job as a petroleum and research geophysicist, that was my front. We were into the Black Ops in Mena, Arkansas. We wrote a book called Choosing the Light. It's about a 700-page book. It's on the website at Ole's bookstore there. And we detailed all the operations there, with Bill and Hillary Clinton, all the cocaine trafficking and arms dealing down in Nicaragua. And then later on was offered the job to bomb the Alfred P. Murrah building by another Black Ops CIA person. Harold Leonard was his name. That was in October of 1994, and I turned that job down on patriotic grounds, and I was about to retire anyway. I retired in, it was March of 1995. And so the whole story got started later in 1999 when I was involved in ATF DEA Operation Stingray in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And there I met the nation's top cop, who was Blake Butler, ATF agent. Vice President Al Gore and Janet Reno, the Attorney General here in the U.S., gave him his award. But we would later find out that Agent Butler had been at the Alfred P. Murrah building working there on the day it was bombed, but he wasn't there mysteriously. He was also at the Ruby Ridge, Idaho shootout where there were 400 federal agents there. That was in August 21st of 1992. He was also at the Branch Davidian Waco compound. A lot of people know about that. That was April 19th of 1993, where the compound was burned down. There was 59 dead and 21 children. So in the book, we tell all these stories. And I was told I was with Agent Butler during Operation Stingray. It was right after the Columbine high school shootings. That was the biggest high school shooting here in the United States at the time. And we were talking, and Bill Clinton, the president of the United States, had come into the area here in Colorado, and him and Janet Reno, the Attorney General, were on TV. We were talking, and I was telling them all about the operations in Arkansas, the pedophile rings, all the drugs, all the illegal arms, and we were being recorded. I didn't know it, and so they planted me with evidence, false evidence, and threw me into federal prison. I had a perfect record, not even one traffic ticket. They did a complete smear job on me, typical CIA smear job, and then they buried the tapes. The CIA disappeared the tapes, and we were placed before Judge Edward Nottingham in the 10th Circuit District Court. And Judge Nottingham had been nominated by the ex-CIA director, George Bush Sr., to his position. And we found out later that the Department of Justice here was steering all the CIA cases or national security cases to Judge Nottingham so he could fix them, so that the truth would never see the light of day. And that's where they sent Oklahoma City bomber Timothy McVeigh up there to him so they could control the case. And then the prosecutor, Thomas Strickland, the United States attorney, he was directly nominated and appointed to his position by President Bill Clinton. He was in a law firm in Denver, Colorado with Brownstein, Hyatt, and Faber. And Norman Brownstein, the principal in that law firm, was once Council of Six. That's a CIA group of attorneys when George Bush Sr. was the DCI, or Director of Central Intelligence. And they handled blowback from any civilian operations that would come across into the Justice Department. So the whole case of mine was fixed. There were other people involved in the Oklahoma City bombing. Kerry James Gagan was one of them. He was another CIA asset that was there. He had driven a truckload of C4 plastic explosives to Trinidad, Colorado, and met three what he called Iraqis, and they had plans to the Alfred P. Murrah building 3 days before it was bombed, and his story's in that book too. But anyway, later on, Judge Nottingham had to resign in a sex scandal with prostitutes, and that was in 2007. So what the story is about the massive corruption and how CIA does a lot of false flag black operations like the Murrah building and others. So it's just a big story of corruption and deep state drug dealing, arms dealing, and then how all of it's covered up by the CIA's secret control of our courts here in America. So that's just kind of a background of things, as I'm covering several decades in a short time.
Yes.
I would like to, if I can add a little bit. I know you, Cody, you've been telling this story a couple of hundred times since we first went out open, or when you stepped forward as a whistleblower. But one thing that is very important to say is that when Cody turned that job down, he was offered it at a point in his career when he was a mess, an absolute mess after more than 20 years in active duty. And so he had a lot of problems with drugs and alcohol and paranoia. I mean, he slept with 2 machine guns in bed and, tripping wire stuff everywhere with explosives in his home. And so when he was approached to do that job, he was offered $1 million, and right away he understood this is a patsy job because it's way too little for a job that magnitude. So he knew that what they wanted to do was get 2 hits in kill 2 birds with a rock, or whatever you call it. So not only did he turn it down because of Patriot things, but also he knew he was being set up. The whole idea was for him to catch on, take that hook, and then go down as the patsy, everything being blamed. Maybe set the whole thing up with the explosives, being filmed without knowing it, and then later going down as a patsy. And so from that moment when he turned that down, like he normally says, he turned from an asset to a liability. And from then on, they really tried to take him out because he's a guy who knew too much. For more than 20 years, he's been involved in this black world of covert operations, all over the world. So, and this is while they later tried to kill him multiple times. So I hope that's okay, Cody, that I took over there, but I know that you told the story so many times that.
Yeah, well, we'll answer any questions. It's a big story it involves a lot of things around the world. One of my girlfriends had dinner with Pablo Escobar down in Miami. We operated through Central and South America and Japan and Mexico and Africa and Middle East and all that. But I'll answer any questions and anything you want to do. But I do want to state the 1982 Intelligence Identities Protection Act. That's the IIPA. That's U.S. Code Title 50, Sections 421 and 426. And it states the disclosure of a U.S. government operative's identity is illegal only if it is done intentionally and with knowledge that the government is still actively maintaining a cover for such operative. And we do that because some of our CIA guys have, let out somebody's name that was operational, like John Kiriakou. He was a CIA case officer, and he was in the RDI program, the Rendition, Detention, and Interrogation Program. And he was sentenced to federal prison in January 2013 because he inadvertently let an agent's name slip. So the names I'm going to use, most of these guys are dead. Some of them are expatriated out of the country and they're not operational anymore, and others I'm not going to use their names. So if there's any questions about any of this, we can do whatever we need to. I'm happy to for this opportunity.
Yep, very good. That's understandable too. A lot of alarming information, but it all makes perfect sense. There's been so many false flag operations. You mentioned, Mena, Arkansas. You see the Fast and Furious, Gulf of Tonkin, and what they did at the Mount Carmel compound, the Branch Davidians. Then they release a lot of propaganda to try and downplay and minimize a lot of it. Until we remove this deep state criminal elements of government, this will continue, a lot of these operations and black budget task forces carrying out these crimes. It's happening on an international and an industrial scale as well, isn't it, Cody?
Yes, sir. And they just had the shooting up in Canada there, and the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, a couple of days after that mass shooting, it was the worst one in Canadian history. They're still, investigating it and finding more bodies. But he immediately called for gun control, and it's the same thing they did in New Zealand with that Christchurch shooting. They create a false flag operation, use it with media control, and then the old problem, reaction, solution that Ole's talked about over and over. They create the problem and lay it on Apache, like Tim McVeigh or anybody. And then the reaction is, oh my God, that's terrible. We got to do something. And then the solution is always more government control, and it takes citizens' freedoms away. And that's what the New World Order is about. Whatever country you're in, their idea is to take over the world and repress the citizens of the world, making us their slaves, and they'll be the masters. And in Oklahoma City, a lot of people don't know. We can talk about this anytime you want, but the real reason for that bombing was the records destruction. And it's the same thing that happened in 9/11 when the Pentagon was hit. One day after Donald Rumsfeld announced there was approximately $2.3 trillion missing, and the one place that got hit was where all the records were, where they were investigating the General Accounting Office and the government records. The Murrah building cover-up dealt basically with the anthrax vaccine for the Desert Storm campaign, January 91 with Saddam Hussein, the Iraq War, and also the depleted uranium scandal. And it was a destruction of the medical records. Also, it was a destruction of some of the records from the Waco Branch Davidian compound fiasco. And I know a person that was a Branch Davidian compound that talked directly to David Koresh right after he got shot, just before the FBI cut the phone line. So also Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton and all of their corruption in the Arkansas case that centered around the three multiply nested operations for the CIA, Jade Bridge, Screwworm, and the one I was in was Centaur Rose. That was a code name, Rose, for the Rose Law Firm. So this is all about records destruction and covering up the tracks of the deep state. And so you're absolutely right. They're doing this all around the world. Ole wrote that book about Olof Palme, the Swedish prime minister who was assassinated, and that ties directly into all of this stuff. You're right. It's a worldwide thing, and we're trying to open people's eyes so that they can see the ugly teeth of this new world order, because it is a conspiracy. Conspiracy is a crime in almost every country, especially high-level conspiracies. And they are engaged in a conspiracy to take the world over, circumvent the governments like in Australia or New Zealand or Canada or Spain or the U.S. here, and they do everything through deception and secrecy. And it's time that we wake up and help our fellow citizens around the world to see the truth.
Yes, very much so. And they've been known to take advantage of people. Lee Harvey Oswald and Timothy McVeigh, he ended up carrying out the bombing. That's what they like to do. And by organising and hiring contractors, it separates them from the crime as well, doesn't it?
Absolutely. That's one reason they approached me. And like Ole said, I was ending my career and I had been severely injured. I had died twice in the hospital and had to be shocked back to life. That was in Project Slammer. That was a 10-year study done here in the United States with the NSA, National Security Agency, the Defense Intelligence Agency, Navy and Army Air Force Intelligence. And we can talk about that later. There's so much here to talk about. But I died, and I had several broken bones and injured. I've got nerve damage. I'm 100% totally and permanently disabled with severe PTSD is what it says on my medical files. But they do use contractors, and then, it's like a Kleenex. When they get done with it, they just throw you away. And there's a whole string of them. And you're absolutely right. That way they can erase their footprints so that the people, all they see in the countries around the world is the propaganda that's put out and not the truth. And the whistleblowers are either arrested, planted with false evidence, murdered. They have a whole wide range of ways to shut up the truth. And we're going to get the truth out one way or the other. We appreciate your show. We appreciate what you're doing.
It's a combined
effort. Can I just add to what Cody said before about Oklahoma City? Because it's one thing if people think that there's speculation behind it. Now, I mean, Cody was deeply involved in these type of operations, so what he says really backs up in truth in my world. But also you can see that when the first bombs went off, it was a disaster. I mean, there was all of this major part of the building was destroyed, and people were lying around in the rubble dying. And lots of people came running to help them. But then suddenly somebody shouted, secondary bombs, get out, evacuate the area. So that's what they did, thinking that there were secondary bombs. It turned out that there were secondary explosives as well. But while the whole area was being cleared up, there were some vans arriving with people in blue jumpsuits that jumped out and ran into the rubble, and they knew exactly what they were looking for. And they came out with cabinet files, cabinets filled with files with these documents pointing towards Bill and Hillary Clinton, their Whitewater big scandals and other scandals, and also these Amtraks, all of that whole thing. They carried these things out, dumped them into the vans, took off high speed, and then everybody was said, now please come back and try and save as many lives as you can. So people were lying around dying while they were there picking up and clearing the evidence.
Yeah, it's a shocking set of circumstances. And even a lot of the anthrax that was being made, that was done in a lot of government buildings, wasn't it? And you had people like Ted Kaczynski involved in that, and it was all being shipped through. It's very disastrous consequences. It was weaponized, wasn't it?
Yeah, I want to, if I could, go through the reasons why that building was bombed. But speaking to what Ole was just saying, there were a lot of people laying around. Now, one of the guys, the very first responder to the Oklahoma City building when it went off at 9:02 a.m. Central Time here in the U.S., That was 25 years ago. On April 19th, 1995, there was a police officer down there by Northwest 5th Street in Oklahoma City. His name was Terry Yeaky, Y-E-A-K-Y, and we have a section in the book about him. And he went running to the building, and there was people lacerated with the glass, and they were bleeding profusely, and he saved 4 people's lives and was awarded the Meritorious Conduct Award by the